Thank you for joining us at FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. Today we're sharing Season 1, Bonus Episode 1, where we dive into our first Q&A session, taken from questions and emails you sent from our podcast series, Cain and Abel. On today's podcast, you will hear from Tanner Moore, Trevor Scott, Miguel Carnero, and Aurora Carnero. Thanks again for joining us at The Table.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to The Table. And both literally and figuratively, welcome to The Table, to the podcast. We're going to start off just with some introductions, and then we'll talk a little bit about why we're here today, what we're going to do today. So let's start right here. And Trevor, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and talk about, just introduce yourself.
All right. So I'm Trevor Scott. I'm one of the assistant principals at the high school here in Seminole, and we moved here 8 years ago, and we got plugged into the church here 8 years ago and been going. And we've been with Tanner when he started the study and the class and kind of moving from there. So we're part of the original OG group.
You're the OGs, man.
Connect, and it's crazy because we've only been here 8 years. But there's been a lot changed in the 8 years we've been here. A lot of growth and a lot of movement in positive directions. New the whole, other than Sean, all new staff and everything has been here in the 8 years since we've been here. But it's been awesome to watch grow and get there. And it's been good for us and our family.
Good. Cool. Well, welcome to the table. And how about you guys? You introduce yourself.
My name is Miguel Carnero. We moved here about a year ago, over a year ago. We were originally from Perryton, and then job kind of pulled me this direction, and so we got plugged right in as soon as we got here, and it's been a lot of fun, man.
Yep. I'm Aurora Carnero. I actually grew up in Seagraves, and so this was like coming home for me, which was fun. But yeah, we've been here a year, and it's just been a blessing to our marriage and our family, and it's been good.
All right. Well, very cool. Welcome, guys. We're glad you're in Seminole. Glad you're here at the table. And one of the reasons why you three guys are here at the table is because you've been listening to the podcast as we've gone on this Cain and Abel kind of maiden voyage together. And you guys are involved in different connect groups or different home groups, but we've all kind of been a part of the same connect group. As we made this transition to kind of a new style of doing church, and so we've studied the Bible together, but you guys have been a part of that first wave of podcast listeners, and so I really just wanted to start off and ask you guys, as you've been listening in to the podcast over the last 7 or 8 weeks now, what are some things that maybe have stood out to you? As we've talked about Cain and Abel, and then worked it out through the rest of the Bible. Anything just kind of major takeaway that you've had over the last 7-8 weeks?
I don't know. One thing that hit with me was just the constant. It's there, but it's always been in the background. But you just brought it forward to the constant struggle between. You have these two decisions. You can act like Cain, or you can act like. The other people you talked about through the Bible, just Hannah. You can make those choices. Every single one of us have those choices on a very regular, constant basis, and you make the choice of which way you want to go. You make the choice of how you want to handle the situation, and do you want to handle it with grace and love, or do you want to murder? I mean, you have that choice, and they're drastic choices, and they're anywhere in between, but it's constant all the way throughout the Bible. You knew us there, but you just kind of brought it more to the forefront.
Do you feel like maybe, as a follow-up question, just choices in our making of choices, do you think maybe we diminish the value, or maybe we don't quite take as seriously the gravity of choices that we have to make on a daily basis?
I think without a doubt, for sure. For sure. I mean, we're not even aware of half the choices we make. You just do it. It gets ingrained in you one way or the other, and I think the more you spend in Scripture and time, and your choices change, that ingraining kind of shifts and changes to the choices you make and the desires you want to have. But your choices are constant, and even more than that, I don't think we understand the repercussions that our decisions make on others. I think Ryan really hit on that a little bit, talking about with being a dad. When the first time I became a dad, holy cow, my choices really matter. And I would reiterate that completely. With 3 daughters, my choices matter a lot. How I handle things at home and do different things.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you guys answer this question too, but it makes me want to think about so many things, and I'm glad you bring that up. I just see myself scrolling through Netflix. You ever have choice paralysis in the world that we live in? Because there's an abundance of choices that you don't even really know what choice to make. And, it's that you might like, and I'm scrolling through, and I've got 50 things that Netflix thinks I might like that I just nah. And then there's really no like loyalty to a choice. You make a choice, you go with the show for 2.5 minutes, you don't feel like it caught your attention, so you hit the back button and you go on to the next show, right? The world that we live in today does not it doesn't take the weight of each individual choice and put maybe the what's the word I'm looking for here? It doesn't put the responsibility on every, because we have so many choices available to us. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is that right? Is that off the mark? What do you think?
There's also like a big fear of missing out factor.
Yeah. Okay.
Where, like you said, you're scrolling, you're looking at Netflix or trying to find a show you want to watch, but you have 50 shows that everyone's recommended. You can only pick one, right? So now it's like, okay, which one do I choose? Which one do I go with? And it's like, if I choose this one, then you're gonna have to miss out on this other one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does that play into like what we're talking about with Cain and Abel, and that my choices have an impact on people around me?
Yeah. What do you think?
Good question.
Yeah. Well, like with kids, right? Like if a big decisions that we make all the time is like food. And so are we giving them the right food, the right nutrition?
Yeah.
But even if we if we think we're doing our best, there's something better. Could we always be doing better? And so you kind of get stuck in that in between, where it's like maybe I'm not doing as good as I should be.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Anybody else have an idea on that?
Yeah, I think you get caught in ruts.
Yeah.
You just get in routines, and you just kind of get in autopilot. And it just kind of drives, and you just go. And that's obviously not the best way to go. You need to take more consideration about the things you do and where you're going. But it's really easy to get caught in that autopilot.
Yeah.
Just listen to Netflix and it tells me what to do. I'm just going to do that.
Yeah.
Instead of going out and figuring out. And being in education, I think it's one thing you try to teach is like, don't just take word for it what it says like on the internet or social media. Like,
right.
Dig it, find it, do your research, like grow, like learn for yourself. Don't take somebody else's word for it.
Yeah, for sure.
It also makes me think of at the very beginning of the podcast, you guys hit on like the comparison aspect of it all. And it also goes to talk about like how as humans we're so interested in like what other people think of our lives. And it makes me think of Hannah and the story of Hannah and how he says like she's sitting there praying and pouring her heart to the Lord, and he says like, oh, you must be drunk, get out. And she's like, no, listen, like I was pouring but if she would have let the priest tell her you're in the wrong, get out, it would have changed the story. And so again, just as humans, we allow outside sources to kind of dictate where we go.
Without a doubt. Very much so. Yeah, that's Tanner and I have talked a few times over things, and people who don't, if you know me, I'm pretty much an introvert. I keep to myself. I don't like to say a whole lot. I like to keep quiet. And I've talked to them. One of the main reasons is I'm always paranoid what other people are going to think of me. I don't want to act a certain way. I don't want to do a certain thing because I think somebody's going to judge me for what I did. Right, wrong, and different. And so my opinion not being judged, I'm going to sit in the corner so you can just ignore me. Because I don't want people to think one way or the other about me. It's constant in my mind, constant battle that I got to go with.
Yeah, and then we just live in a world where our whole lives, it seems like, are constantly broadcast to everyone around us. And, we live in a world of the mob, the mass hysteria, canceling people for a mistake that they make. And, it's almost like the world we live in teaches us that our bodies are our brand, and you have to be a good brand manager. And your job, if you really want to be worth something, is to make sure that you manage your brand in a way that attracts attention, positive attention in the form of, hearts or thumbs ups or, whatever that thing is, and it's just by the nature of the world we live in, it kind of teaches us to live and to act that way. But what I'm hearing you guys say is that, the Cain and Abel story maybe is calling us a different direction, to live a different way. So what way is it calling us to live? As you've been listening, what is that pull, and where do we go?
We're called to do what's right, and that's simple, super easy to say, and then like 2 weeks ago, in the Micah episode, just to love justice, to walk humbly with the Lord, like, it's super simple. Oh, man. Like, it's not hard, but just like that aspect of it, of dealing with other people, to deal with like the push and the pull of society. That's what makes it complicated, and I guess in our own minds too, right? Yeah. Once we get caught up in our sin, and once we see that sin crouching at the door, that battle, it's, I don't know, that's what makes it hard.
Yeah. One of Tanner's favorite sayings is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And it is simple, but it's not easy. And it's easy to, those are just things that keep coming up all the time. Making the right decision is not always easy, but it's simple. It is the right thing to do. And you can easily get caught in society's ways. And like you said, our society is a very selfish society. It's a very me-centric society. And to put yourself on the back burner and think of others. Yeah. And y'all said it quite a bit, like in I think our society, especially right now where we're at, is very victim society. Victims get all the stories. Victim get all the news. Victim gets everything. And it's very easy to put ourselves in Abel's shoes because he's the victim. But we seldom put ourselves in Cain's shoes. That's a great point. How often are we truly Cain and not Abel? Yeah. Because there's only a victim out there because a Cain's out there. Somebody's being the Cain.
That's a great point.
And a lot of time it's us.
Yeah.
But we don't want to think about that. We'd rather be the victim. And we need to eliminate our Cain.
Again, goes back to the last episode where you guys were talking about when they're deciding to crucify Jesus, and we always say they, as the crowd, but it's us. We decided that.
For sure.
Yeah, man, great already. I love the conversation we've had, and let's kind of move, to this side of the table for a second and say, okay, so now over the last 7-8 weeks, what are some things that maybe the thing that stood out to you is like, oh man, that was the thing that hit home to me, or what do you guys think?
The big thing for me was looking at the story through a new lens. Almost. Yeah. I mean, the way you guys broke it down and how it paralleled other stories through the rest of the Bible, it was good to look at it with fresh eyes. Almost. Yeah. And that's kind of where one of my questions came from. Yeah. When we were talking about that, is I was finally looking at the story through, I don't know, a new lens almost. Yeah. And so it's been good.
Good. We're going to get to that question as we move on towards the end. And so it sounds like this is a story that you're already familiar with. Yeah. A story you've probably read, but maybe there's a little new perspective now. Yeah. So do you feel like maybe listening into this podcast kind of shifted a little bit your perspective on even the purpose of the story and the way that the story functions within the Bible? And if so, speak to that a little bit. Maybe how did your perspective shift in the way you look at this story in the Bible and how it relates?
I didn't realize, or it wasn't in the forefront of my mind, how often this happens. Yeah. Like with the Hannah story and the Saul and Samuel story, and Saul and David, so on and so forth. And so, as you read those stories, you're like, oh, it's the same story. And we always talk about like how the humans then, like, we're the same humans now. Yeah. Right? Like nothing about us other than like the clothing and the technology have changed. Internally, we're the same humans. Yeah. And so watching it play out over and over and over through this last 6 or 7 weeks was really cool. And like, it brought up a lot of things like, okay, where am I allowing sin to be crouching at the door? Being more mindful of those things. So
yeah. I'm a basketball coach, and I like to watch course, basketball film, and I watch from the high school level to professional level and everything in between. And something that I really like, some of the best coaches, as I study what they do, is, you know, that they'll have their basic offense that they like to run. And maybe it looks a certain way, and then there's a variation to that offense where 3-4 possessions into the game, it starts the way that the offense normally starts, but then somebody who originally screened, instead of screening, he's going to cut and get a pass, and it makes the defense, you know, off balance a little bit. And so you've got like this theme of, we run this style of offense, but then there's a variation to that theme where all of a sudden now a different guy's going to be the focal point within the play. And then a few sets later, a few possessions later, it's the guy who's been making the pass. He's going to, you know, pass, and then somebody's going to set a screen for him, and he's going to get it back. And the last guy you expected to take the shot is going to be wide open. And sometimes you get these coaches who are just these brilliant basketball coaches, and it's so simple, but it's like a recycled, with just a recycled theme, a recycled movement with just a slightly different angle that reveals a totally different part of the floor that you didn't expect to be attacked. You know, I feel like that the Bible kind of works that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got like this offense you could compare it to, and it gets run like the Cain and Abel story, and then all of a sudden there's a new character who shows up that you think is going to act this way, and then it reveals something, that just a slightly different shift or variation in the story, and it reveals something that you totally didn't see coming. But how enlightening, and how you know, how much wisdom there is in the story of Hannah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that works. Awesome, cool. Thanks for sharing that. Aurora, how about you? Have we covered everything, or is something else that maybe has stood out to you over the last? We hit you last. I'm sorry. We'll
No,
let you
you're
go first
good. No, you're good. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered everything. It's been really good.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot this last week about the Micah verse, Micah 6:8, because it's one of our favorite verses, and me personally, like, I love to recite it and talk about it. And then this podcast really made me realize like how I hadn't taken it in full context. You know, like he was so wrestling with that. Like it was hard, but then that's where he lands. So it was just cool.
Talk about that a little bit, about, and this is one of my favorite things. You know, Trevor mentioned we've been studying the Bible together for almost a decade now. We've been, you know, friends for a long time, but for those of you guys who know me, the big context and the big picture is something that I just really am geeked out about. So talk a little bit about that, about, you know, one verse that means a lot to you, but then whenever you zoom out and you see the context, how it can change. You know, speak to that a little bit.
I think we do that all throughout the Bible, you know, with the cute little Hobby Lobby things that are sometimes so out of context. But it makes it so much sweeter when you know the background behind it, and why he landed specifically Micah 6:8, why Micah ended up saying like, this is where this is going to end, you know, because this is a wrestle where I don't know what it's going to take for it to be fine with God. Will I have to give my firstborn, which God eventually does, but then he says like, okay, I can do these things, and that's it.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit, and I actually want to talk about one of my favorite parts of the series over these, you know, last 8 weeks was way towards the beginning, and it was I think that Sean and I were having a conversation about how we could take these decisions and we could put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I think we did a little bit right at the beginning of our conversation tonight, that our choices matter, right? But something that in the conversation we had at the beginning of the podcast, something that we decided was, but look at the power our choices have to create good as well. A lot of times, I think, and I don't know if it's maybe the kind of the evangelical world that we live in, you know, which teaches us to be very aware of our sin and to be very humble before God, which I think is awesome and we should do, right? But oftentimes we we take these choices and we immediately go to, when I make a bad choice, it has the power to destroy this thing, right? But what about the flip side to that? And that's something that really stood out to me, is that I've got the power not just to create death, but my choices have the power to change the world for good as well. Let's talk about that for a second. Well, what does that mean to you? And, you know, how can we take this story and make it something positive, and even something that inspires and is motivational for us to do that kingdom work that we've been called to?
It's one of the reasons why I love education.
Okay.
Is the ability to have that positive impact
Yeah.
on so many generations for such a long time, and it just hopefully grows and keeps going. But just the ability to have the impact with that. In public education, you obviously deal with a vast variety and array of students and issues and beliefs and backgrounds and upbringings and struggles and everything else. And it's always, I don't know what's the right word. Just it's fun to watch, but it's also humbling, I guess, to see when education's done right, it truly impacts so much. And you can see the slightest little thing, like giving this person who hasn't had a whole lot of breaks, giving them a break, and like the kid takes it and runs.
Yeah.
And just makes a life-changing, altering after that. Or how many times you see the kid who has just struggled through school and struggled and didn't do right, or was always in the office getting in trouble, and they finally graduate high school, and you see them 4 or 5 years later down the road, and man, they're making a living, and they got a family, and they're doing things right.
Yeah.
And they'll say, hey, it's because of what you did to back then. Like, education is that's one thing I miss the most about coaching.
Yeah.
Because that coaching is that like 10, 20, 30 fold.
Yeah.
Because you can invest in those kids.
Right.
And you can truly make an impact. And I always found it more to invest in the ones that didn't have a whole lot at home.
Yeah.
So they need that positive influence. They need that second chance. They need that encouragement. And that's what education and coaching has the ability to do. And it's one of the reasons why I'm in it. And it's one of the reasons why I love it. And I think it's extremely important to be involved in that and do those things right. Because you can change it for the better without a doubt. Can you change it for the worse? But I think we do a whole lot more good than we do bad.
Absolutely.
A whole lot more good.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, for sure. What do you guys think about that? How do we take this and make it positive and, you know, inspire us to, hey, let's go do stuff. Let's go do good stuff, right?
The first thing, of course, that comes to mind is parenting. You know, like for whatever reason, God thought it was fit for me to be entrusted with these two tiny humans. You know, if it were up to me, I would
hit me, man.
I would ruin them.
I've got two tiny humans
right?
too. Wow,
but he saw that it was fit for me to be their mom. Yeah. And so I will do whatever I can to make sure that they are God-fearing, God-loving humans when they get out of my house. And that looks different, again, than the world that we live in right now, where it's like, okay, well, you do you and you do what's best. No, like my kids are going to love the Lord and know the Lord when they leave my house, if it's up to me, because that's what the Lord has given to me.
We were talking about this last night. I was telling her that the most clear example of grace that I've ever seen is in my kids. Right? Because when my anger flares up and I'm getting them in trouble, and they're sent to their room, and now they're crying and screaming, and I'm being cold, like, no, stay over there, you did wrong. After the punishment, after all this dust settles, like, I'm still their favorite person. You know, like, they still want to come and play with me, hang out with me, and, like, that's, to me, that's grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know what stands out to me in what we just said? Not a single one of you said anything about being at church. My question was, how do we take this and we use it as something positive and look at the impact we can make in our world and look at the work for God we can do? And nobody said a word about coming to church, being at church, or worship services. What do you think about that?
I think look at our connect groups. You know, like it's church in these homes. And so I think there's something to be said about that as well. Where, yes, don't get me wrong, like church is so important and you have to get plugged in and you have to have that fellowship because that's where it all stems from. But church is also outside of these walls.
And you're not doing life in church, right? Like you're doing life at work. You're doing life at the grocery store. You're doing life literally everywhere else.
Right.
6 days out of the week, 6.5 days out of the week.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's not like, I mean, that's where life is. That's where you're gonna be a light.
Yeah.
That's where you're gonna make an impact. It's outside of the church walls. Work. I've seen that with in her life a lot.
Yeah. And church is where I don't know, for me, is where you go get filled back up. You kind of go get refreshed and you get refocused for whatever. But yeah, you make a lot bigger impact outside the walls than you ever do inside the walls. That's why I like things like community service. I want to find more ways to do that, and I struggle. But like community rehab, I think, is huge. Just reaching out and helping people wherever you can.
Helping somebody rewire their house. And
Seminole strong.
Seminole, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. But that's one of my love languages is service.
Yeah.
I like to serve.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's where that's big, and I think you can make a big impact that way. Seminole strong and the different things that we do. I think those are very, very important. But as you serve, people are watching you, and you got to make sure you do it with the right purpose and the right heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm thinking already just a little preview about what's coming. In our next series that we're going to do together is going to be called Seeds of Eden. And it's going to be a series on just, practical Christian living in everyday life, right? How do we plant and water seeds of Eden in our part of the world, right? In our front yard, in our backyard. And so we're kind of along those lines right now, but I almost feel like there's this idea that, if we want to make an impact for the kingdom of heaven, if we want to make an impact for Jesus, that we need to go on mission trips. And obviously mission trips are great. Go on mission trips. But we need to go, to fly to a different country, and we need to, put on a VBS for kids in some foreign land. Or if we want to truly make an impact for Jesus, then, well, we have to, hand out pamphlets that have God's path to salvation, and we need to, pray over people. And absolutely, we should pray over people, and we should try to lead people to Jesus. But what's interesting to me is that's not where our minds went as we talked about this story, and we talked about how it looks in our lives. We didn't go to, the way that this should inspire us is, it should inspire us to preach the gospel everywhere we go. This should inspire us to walk out into our front yard with a megaphone and, press the button and start shouting at all of our neighbors and, waking them up to, you need to repent for the kingdom of heaven is here. And like that's not what resonated with us. And like you said, Miguel, is that there's life lived all the places we go, right? The way that we interact with somebody at the grocery store. Today I went to McDonald's, and I'm going through so you talk about food. Bad. Bad move. And but I went anyway, so I'm at McDonald's, and you know how sometimes your food's not ready, so they say pull up to that little number 1, and so you pull up, and I pull up, and I'm sitting there, and I'm listening to my podcast, not me. I feel weird sometimes, like, am I supposed to listen to myself? Is that vain to listen to yourself? And so I don't know, Garrison, do you listen to yourself as we podcast?
It's awkward. It's weird.
It is awkward, isn't it? If y'all didn't hear Garrison back there.
I do not plan on watching this one or listening to this one.
Okay, yeah.
It's like watching film.
It's like watching.
It is like watching film.
It is like watching film. I do find myself being very critical of, I should have said. Or,
if you're going to get better at it, you got to listen to it.
That's true.
That's the way you can do that.
I listen to it, but then sometimes I feel weird listening. Anyway, okay, I'm off on a big tangent right now. I'm talking about McDonald's. So I'm at McDonald's, and I'm listening to a preacher, a podcast, a preacher who did a sermon on Sunday, and I'm literally listening to the Word of God, and the people at McDonald's have forgotten my order, right? I mean, I'm looking at my rearview mirror, and about the 15th car has gone, and finally, this lady walks out to me, and she says, "What did you order?" So I hand her my receipt. She takes it. Well, she goes in and comes right back out with my food. Like it's been sitting there. They forgot about my order, right? Okay, that is the moment that we have. And so did I plant my garden seed and give, Jesus grace? I'm listening to a sermon and she hands me the food and says, have a nice day. And I just grab the bag of food, throw it in the drive and get out of there. And as I'm driving, I'm about halfway down the road and the sermon that I'm listening to, I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm literally listening to the word of God being preached to me, but I've got an opportunity right here to actually do it. I got a chance to actually live it right here in the McDonald's drive-through line. And I blew it. Yeah. And the places where we make the impact in our world for Jesus is not in church. And I'm not saying don't come to church. Like you guys said, I'm not saying don't come, and I'm not saying that we should, not listen to praise and worship music and that we should not listen to preachers preach sermons. But what I'm saying is if we don't do that stuff in the McDonald's drive-thru line, in the grocery store, at work, if we don't actually live those values with the kids in our classrooms, the kids on our teams, then what are we doing? Right? What's the whole point of it? Well, let's just kind of have one final thought about our Cain and Abel, one final question about this, and then we'll get into some questions that were asked about the series, which I think will be fun to answer as well. But so one final question about the Cain and Abel series is, so as you're going through the series, has anything happened in your life over the last 8 weeks that maybe triggered something that you heard from the podcast, like some kind of just a practical, this thing happened to me, and I thought about something from the series?
Top of my head, no. This week, though, just kind of going off what you just said about the McDonald's line. Our smallest puppy fractured her foot. Sam, our youngest boy, fractured her foot. He fell off the chair. The chair landed on the dog. Hairline fracture.
Oh, okay.
And so we took her to the vet.
Yeah.
And I kind of get like an estimate. Like, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah.
Who's the vet,
Which is the question I would ask too.
And we get an estimate, and I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And so then I show up to pick her up, and it's like almost double of what they quoted me.
Ooh.
And in that moment, I had a choice.
Yeah.
And I made the wrong choice, I think. Because, I mean, I don't think I was rude. I don't think I said anything mean.
I think you were a little bit ruder than maybe I would have been.
But they could probably...
It's fun to have husband and wives on this episode. Like we did it the last time, too. And it's always fun. I'm sorry.
But they could see it in my face.
Yeah.
That I was just, like, not happy about it.
Right.
And so I picked up the dog and I just left. And so the reason I know they noticed is because then she got a text.
Uh-oh.
And they were like, hey, sorry we made your husband upset and all this. And it's one of those moments, like I had an opportunity there to be more graceful, to just be more understanding of why the cost was almost double.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that moment where I made the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, McDonald's hamburgers, puppies, it's like they're close to the same, same thing that we're talking about here. So I can totally relate to why you'd be upset about that.
But I was thinking about this 2 days ago, I think. But things like that, where you kind of know you're going to sin, almost you kind of know, but you know what the consequences are going to be. And this will lead kind of what we'll talk about later. But there's a lot of times where your sin is not pre-planned, calculated almost. Like if I'm speeding, like if I'm going 85 in a 60, or a 75, I know that I'm breaking the law. Yeah. But I know what the consequence is going to be.
Right.
If I get caught, the worst, I'm going to get a ticket. Yeah. I'm going to have to go to defensive driving. Right. And so I was thinking about how maybe we do that with our lives, where we know the hard stuff, like, okay, murder, I know that's going to change my life completely. Yeah. If I cheat on my wife, it's going to change my life completely. Yeah. Being mad at the vet, probably not going to have a whole lot of consequences. That's probably not going to be that drastic. Yeah.
Or so we tell ourselves.
Exactly.
And to circle back to like what Trevor was talking about at the beginning, but But does that have that interaction though? It does, right? And not my interaction with the lady in the McDonald's drive-thru, same thing. Like those little moments have the power to change our world, right? They really do, and to change it in the name of Jesus, right?
No, I mentioned it earlier, and Ryan said it, like being a parent, whatever, and that's one of my biggest struggles is at school. I'm pretty calm and laid back and relaxed, and I put up with a lot. I give an absurd amount of grace and understanding to students and their backgrounds and where they're coming from, and I don't discipline them as hard as I should, just different things along those lines. When I come home, I don't want to say I'm a different person, but I'm a different person. And when he said that different stuff, it kind of hit home, just like I need to do that with my kids. Kind of had an incident with my middle daughter this week. She wasn't helping me. I was stuck in a she put a ball on the roof for like the third time in 3 weeks. And the ladder weighs a ton. They got to get up to move it to get on the roof. And this one was in a place I might be able to get it without getting on the roof. And I'm reaching a broom up there trying to get it nice and good. And at the same time, the siding's poking me in the side and I'm doing whatever. And she's not telling me. I'm not hearing enough words if I'm close enough. If I'm not, I said, fine, if you're not helping me, I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
You know, and and it upset her. And rightfully so. And have to turn around and apologize and fix that and say, oh, but it's realizing those things sometimes.
Boy, it's a good thing we never do the same thing to God 3 times in a row, you know, and need Him to forgive us and get our ball off the roof.
Yeah.
You know, I've only ever done something wrong twice. I've never done it a third time, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, but I think we've all been there, right? Where it's like, okay, 3 times, enough, right?
Yeah.
Enough. And
but I have that kid who skips class 3 times. I'm like, all right, I'll give you one more, but I won't give it to my daughter.
Yeah. Aurora, anything you want to add on to that part? We keep coming to you last.
No, you're good. I think it's almost become like this ongoing. So we check in on each other a lot, and you know, we did the marriage counseling thing, not counseling, conference.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so we're like, how full is your left tank? You know, like all cheesy.
Okay, yeah.
But then we also do
They're
like
those people.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. But also here since this, it's also been like, okay, in your life, just so that I can proactively pray for you. What sin do you feel is crouching at your door?
Wow.
And in our house, that's been asked. Since we've started this, it's become a conversation where, because you don't want to confess those things. You don't want to sit with your spouse and say like, okay, here's where I'm being sinful. But I think it festers more if we just hold on to it. A lot like in this story, like he was so angry and allowed it to just fester that I think, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's I don't want to ramble, but it's helped
a lot. That's awesome though.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, that is so cool. That's such a good idea. Awesome.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.